The greatest moment at Wrigley Field took place on October 1st, 1932. The World Series matchup was between the New York Yankees and the Chicago Cubs. Before the series had started, some significant arguments had taken place between the two teams and would have a big effect on the series. The arguments started over former Yankees shortstop Mark Koenig, who the Cubs had acquired earlier in the season. Despite Koenig's regular season contributions, his team would only give him half a share of the World Series salary because he played in only 33 games and was unable to play in the series due to injury. When Yankee players heard of this, they started to criticize the Cubs for being cheap, and Babe Ruth's remarks seemed to set them off the most. When Game 1 started, players on the Cubs team were calling Ruth fat and washed up, along with every obscene word they could think of, and these arguments would last throughout the series. The Yankees would take the first two games of the series before it moved to Chicago. Starting for the Cubs in Game 3 was Charlie Root, who was one of the premier pitchers in his day and won 15 games during the regular season. But the Yankees would get to Chinsky in the first inning. Ruth would come up to the plate with 2 on and nobody out and hit a home run to right center, giving the Yankees a 3-0 lead. Root would give up another run in the third inning, but the Cubs would tie the game in the bottom of the fourth on an error by Yankee second baseman Tony Lazzeri. Then came the top of the fifth inning, in which one of the most historic moments in baseball history would be made. With 1 out and nobody on base, the Bambino would come up again with the players in the Cubs dugout riding him mercilessly. However, rather than ignoring them, Ruth was playing with them through words and gestures. Root's first pitch to Ruth was a called strike. Ruth then looked at the Cubs dugout, raising his right hand and extending one of his fingers. Root would throw 2 pitches for balls, but the next pitch would be a strike. Ruth would wave back at the Cubs dugout and hold up 2 fingers. He began to shout at Root, and it is at this point that he made a pointing gesture in the direction of Root, center field, or to the Cubs bench. When he made this gesture, the crowd of 49,986 had different views on what he was pointing to, but it was believed by many that he was calling a shot. Ruth would then hit the next pitch to the deepest part of center field, and the ball would travel more than 440 feet over the fence and give the Yankees a 5-4 lead. Lou Gehrig would come up and hit another home run to extend the lead to 2, and the Yankees would go on to win the game 7-5 and sweep the Cubs in 4 games, winning their first World Series in 4 years. But people would forever remember the 1932 World Series for Babe Ruth's gestured home run in Game 3. Over the years, it's been a mystery on whether or not he called his shot, with many people having different perspectives on whether or not he did it. After the game, a reporter named Joe Williams, who believed that Ruth had called his shot, posted a newspaper article on the game with the headline saying, "Ruth calls shot as he puts home run number 2 in side pocket." Williams's article was the only one written the day of the game that made a reference to Ruth pointing to center field. Many people read the article and assumed it was accurate. A couple of days later, even more stories started to appear stating that Ruth had called his shot. The story would have some credibility given Ruth's many larger-than-life achievements. In the public mind, Ruth calling his shot was very believable. At the time, Ruth did not clarify the matter. He initially stated that he was pointing towards the Cubs dugout to tell them he still had 1 more strike, but in later interviews he would have different views on the subject. In one interview, he said he did not point to any particular spot, and that his subsequent version over the years had become more dramatic. Ruth would also say in later interviews that he did call his shot and was pointing at the flagpole, along with saying that he dreamed about hitting the home run the night before the game. And in yet another statement, Ruth would say that he was upset about the Cubs' insults during the series, and was especially upset when someone spit on his wife Claire, and he was determined to fix things. Ruth not only said he deliberately pointed to center with 2 strikes, he said he pointed to center even before Root threw his first pitch. Whether or not Ruth really called his shot, this home run would be remembered as one of many of Babe Ruth's most memorable moments and would go down as one of the most historic moments in all of sports.